just because your baby rejects a certain food, don't give up. That's how you immediately end any opportunity of them ever learning to like it.
Yeah, you just keep offering it.
Yes. Over and over again.
It's so easy as a parent to be like, well, yeah, why am I going to make food that I know my kid might not like? And I think that tends to be such a sort of common barrier, but the reality is that kids are picky. And so if we sort of stop it and don't give it, then we're really not giving our kids the opportunity to be adventurous eaters.
Yeah.
The beauty of baby-led weaning is that you can really look at, okay, what am I making already for the family and how can I adapt a portion for baby? And I think that's why baby-led weaning does resonate with so many people. Can you imagine like baby number 5, you're having to spoon feed at dinner? It just wouldn't happen.
Because this is this window of opportunity for flavor acceptance, we want you doing everything. We want you trying a new food every day. The old advice that you had to do one food every 3 to 5 days, it actually just doesn't really make sense. It's not necessary. And it could also inhibit this ability to have exposure to a wide variety of foods pretty quickly. So yeah, fruits, vegetables, all of the foods your family eats, if you can find a way to prepare them in a baby safe form.
2 purposes of solid introduction before age 1 is to really ensure adequate iron intake and then also promote adventurous eating. Your baby loves food. They start to, usually accept a lot of different flavors, and we really want to sort of capture that.
In this follow-up episode with 2 dietitians, Whitney and Alex from Plant-Based Juniors, we sit down to discuss postpartum care and optimal nutrition for mothers during the postpartum phase and a dive into starting baby on solid foods. I personally loved this conversation because I'm super passionate about breastfeeding and supporting mothers in their sensitive and delicate postpartum experience. I also just love the information Whitney and Alex have to share on optimal nutrition for babies and mothers. Both mothers to predominantly plant-based children themselves, Plant-Based Juniors was created because they saw a need for easy to access information on evidence-based nutrition for pregnancy and kids. They've since helped families all around the world to feel confident and empowered in nourishing their families with plants as the primary focus. In this episode, we cover nutrition considerations for postpartum mothers and throughout the breastfeeding journey, tips for successful breastfeeding, what the science says about raising children plant-based, baby-led weaning, starting baby on solid foods, picky eating, food play, food exposure, and more. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and welcome to the Ellen Fisher Podcast. Here we go. If you've been needing to upgrade your cleaning routine, I've got the perfect non-toxic and biodegradable cleaning products for you to try. Branch Basics is free of fragrances, hormone disruptors, and harmful preservatives that replace all your toxic cleaning products. I feel comfortable and safe using them in my home around my children, and they're also plant-based, which is super important to me. So many of the cleaning products on the market are largely filled with water, wasting plastic and creating unnecessary waste. But Branch Basics has a solution, a concentrate that is used in different dilutions to create all of the cleaning solutions. Then just refill the bottles when you're out. It's simple and environmentally friendly. 1 bottle of concentrate makes 3 all-purpose cleaners, 3 bathroom cleaners, 3 streak-free cleaners, 3 foaming hand washes, and 64 loads of laundry because you dilute the concentrate with water in the reusable bottles. And the Oxygen Boost is a multi-use powder that can be used for a variety of different purposes, such as removing stains in laundry, to deodorizing, whitening, and brightening clothing, and in bathrooms for grout, shower, and toilets. These products work amazing too. No need for toxic cleaning products. It's time to replace all your toxic cleaning products because Branch Basics sets you up for success with their starter kit, which comes with both the concentrate and the Oxygen Boost. So use my code ELLEN15 for 15% all Branch Basics starter kits. You'll be so happy with the result and making the switch to non-toxic and sustainable cleaning products. They're effective, beautiful bottles in your home, and it's just a win-win solution. All right, we are back for another episode. I'm having so much fun with you guys. I feel like there would be no lag in talking with us. Like there hasn't been a moment
Yes,
since in our presence together where we're like, what do we talk about next? There hasn't been a moment of that at all.
And I'm kindred spirits.
Yeah, I really feel that way. I feel like we could go on and on and on together. And we haven't even talked about so many things that we could talk about. But today, we're going to talk about postpartum care for mothers, considerations for breastfeeding to be successful at breastfeeding, and a deeper dive into starting solid foods, which we touched on the breastfeeding and solid foods, or I did with Dr. Gemma Newman, but we're going to take a little deeper dive in that one and hone in on the specifics of that. So before we get into this, if you haven't listened to the first episode that we did with you two, Whitney and Alex from Plant-Based Juniors, definitely go check out that first one. It was an amazing episode. And maybe you could just quickly just share a little bit about you guys real quick for those who haven't listened to the first one.
Sure. We are Whitney and Alex. We're both registered dietitian nutritionists, moms of 2 kids each, and we are the co-creators of Plant-Based Juniors, a platform dedicated to helping parents and also other professionals get more plants on the plate and understand all of the various aspects of both plant-based and predominantly plant-based eating patterns.
Yeah, and our goal is really to be as inclusive as a community as possible. We focus on really bringing everyone in to consume more plants more often, and we do this through our books and our courses.
Perfect. All right, let's jump right into it.
Yeah.
What are the most important nutrition considerations for breastfeeding mothers and the postpartum experience to like be well nourished in your postpartum phase, especially because it can be a stressful time with having a new baby, especially if it's your first time when you're just trying to figure it out and you're like, why is my baby crying? Or how do I do this breastfeeding thing and support myself at the same time?
Survive.
Nutritionally. Yeah. How do you, best set yourself up for success to feel your best and take care of yourself and your baby?
Yeah, I mean, the nutrient considerations for breastfeeding are really the same as pregnancy, just increased. We want to be able to make sure that we are nourishing mom, that we are aiding in her recovery after giving birth, and then also providing enough nutrition to pass to her breast milk in order to nourish her baby, because we got to help mama heal, and we also have to grow that sweet little baby. So, the big thing to consider is calories. This is really a time to focus on nourishment and not on weight loss. That's also going to help you set up for a really successful breastfeeding journey, because one of the biggest factors when it comes to having an adequate milk supply is ensuring that there is enough energy, enough calories to do so. Protein needs stay about the same. And then, just sort of, again, the similar considerations that we'd focus on when it comes to pregnancy. ACOG does recommend DHA as well if you're not consuming fatty fish 2 times a week, about 300 milligrams a day. And then, again, ensuring adequate intake of B12, vitamin D, iodine, vitamin A, sort of all of the many nutrients. And a lot of women want to continue taking their prenatal vitamin, which is fine as well.
Yeah, the kind of reassuring thing or relief, I think, is that you don't have to learn a whole new set of nutritional knowledge. A lot of the things that you did, or pretty much everything you did in pregnancy, just kind of keep doing. You just need a little bit more of most of the nutrients. So keep taking your prenatal vitamin, keep nourishing your body with all of the foods that we talked about. The only nutrient need that actually goes down during breastfeeding is iron. And that's because when you're breastfeeding, you're not menstruating. You're not growing the baby anymore, so you don't need to provide iron for the growing baby. And breast milk is actually really low in iron too, so you're not trying to get iron to be transferred through the breast milk. So provided you didn't have some trauma during birth and lose a lot of blood, you actually don't need as much iron. And that doesn't mean don't stop eating iron-rich foods. You certainly should continue those. But if you were perhaps taking an additional iron supplement because you were worried you weren't getting enough through your prenatal, you could probably discontinue that during the breastfeeding period.
Interesting. That's really interesting about iron.
Yeah, I think your needs are actually... Are they the same as an adult male or around that?
Yeah,
so males have like such a low iron need. There's RDA is 8 milligrams for a man, whereas it's 18 for a woman, and then all the way up to 27 milligrams for a pregnant woman. So this is like the only time during a woman's life that it like plummets down to that really low level.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I love what you brought up about focusing on nourishment and increasing your calories rather than weight loss. It's not the time to be thinking about weight loss. It's the last thing that should be on your mind. That weight is like supposed to be there,
That's
basically.
right. You grew life, and your body was so incredible to be able to nourish not only your pregnancy, but also to be strong enough to deliver that baby. We don't suddenly need to now be focused on weight loss.
And that's when we really do see a lot of problems with supply is when women all of a sudden, understandably, thanks to societal pressure, feel like all of a sudden they need to bounce back or whatever, and they start restricting calories, dipping too low, and their body just doesn't have enough energy to produce enough breast milk.
And hopefully this comes with women feeling supported.
That's right.
After they give birth too, because when it comes to eating enough calories, you really need a lot of support.
Yes.
Because you have to be resting and healing in bed. So what recommendation do you have for that there?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the first thing, just sort of first and foremost, is giving yourself that grace, and also to, really sort of take advantage of whatever village you have. I used to tell my friends, like, I don't need anything. The baby doesn't need anything, but we need food. And so, I I don't want baby clothes, but I do want you to come over with some energy balls or, something, because that's just so helpful. Thankfully, with both my pregnancies, my husband was a really great support to help, make food and have things ready to supply. So I would just say lean wherever you can, but then also give yourself grace. There was definitely many times where my meals and snacks would be just a quick piece of bread with some peanut butter on it, or even like a bowl of cereal, just some sort of a quick nourishment. It didn't always have to be this, beautiful, abundant meal.
Yeah, my first midwife had told me after I gave birth, she said, nobody should be coming to your home unless they're bringing you food or doing your laundry.
I love that.
This isn't for them to, just love on your baby. This is the time for you to love on your baby and bond with your baby. Everyone else is supposed to be taking care of you. Yes. And I know that that's not really the case for a lot of women, or for some women where they don't maybe have the support system that would be optimal or ideal. But like you said, lean in wherever you can, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. And I think so many of us are not conditioned to ask for help. We're so used to being Superwoman and just saying, like, I've got it, I'm okay. And I feel like it is such a great time to be like, actually, no, here's what I need, and here's exactly how you can help. And, I think all of us know when we have someone that we love who, just had a baby, we want to help them where we can. And so, it's very like, okay, great. This is exactly what I can do. I know this is going to help you and not take away from your experience.
Yeah. Our PBJ energy balls are like the number one gift I give to people who just gave birth. I'm like, here is a frozen batch. You put it in your freezer. Hopefully that'll last you for a little while.
And a lot of times people are well-meaning and they want to help, but if they say something open-ended like, hey, let me know if you need any help, it's less likely the person's going to take you up on their offer unless you give something specific. So something that can make it easy for you, if you're the person that people are offering help to, is in the postpartum phase, you can send them a meal train link. Hopefully you can
did that,
hopefully you can have one of your friends set that up for you and then send it out to all your friends. But if anybody's asking, how can I help in some way, like, send them the meal train link, and you can even put in dietary preferences in that link so that people know. You could even put links to recipes you like, any of that stuff, to make it easy for people to know, like, how to help you your best.
Yeah, so smart.
So basically it sounds like you just need to increase your calories in regards to nutrition. If you're already focusing on the nutrition
and if you're eating a quality nutrient dense diet, by increasing your calories, you're by proxy also going to be increasing all of those micronutrients and protein and everything as well. So it, like we said in the last episode, it doesn't have to be this quantitative thing. It's kind of trusting your body, eating when you feel like you need it, which is all the time when you're breastfeeding. Eating lots of frequent meals, because sometimes you don't know how long it's going to be before you're going to get another one. So if you have an opportunity.
And larger portions. Like, don't be afraid of the large portions because you need your calories, your caloric needs are increasing, like you said. So just eat more. Eat more bites. Eat bigger smoothies, bigger bowls of beans and rice and potatoes with hummus or guacamole. All the normal, wonderful, healthy foods. Just increase that plate a little bit more. And don't be afraid to eat until you're totally satisfied.
And I think the main way to do that is really then working on the mental aspect of letting go of all of these preconceived notions of how you're supposed to be postpartum, how quickly you're supposed to lose this weight. If you can let that go and trust your body on how much you need to nourish yourself, that's going to be so much better. So many women I talk to, they're like, I was so hungry. I wanted to eat in the middle of the night when I'm breastfeeding. I'm like, then eat. They're like, but intermittent fasting and this and that. And you're like, all of that needs to go out the window. I mean, I think every single night with both of my children, and probably the first 6 months, I would have a pita with peanut butter in the middle of the night because that's what I was craving. 3 a.m. I'm getting it. There's no reason why I wouldn't nourish myself right now.
Totally. So. And on my main YouTube channel, I always show my week after with a newborn baby, and I'm showing how large my portions are. My husband's bringing me in this giant bowl of all my favorite type of fixings, and I'm eating bigger portions than I'm used to because, like you said, now is not the time to focus on weight loss. And your optimal weight will happen very naturally and gradually the way it's supposed to when you're eating a well-planned, healthy diet.
Normalize nutrition
Yes.
and nourishment.
Yes.
Yeah. And then just last thing I'll say is I think this is also a great way that the partner can feel involved, you know, especially when it comes to breastfeeding. I feel like so much of it is about mama and baby. And it's like you know, your partner can be supportive of you to say like, okay, you know, it's the middle of the night feed. Obviously, they're not going to be able to help you with the breastfeeding part. But this is when I would tell my husband, like, I need water and a snack. And it'd be like, that's how he can help me be nourished and help me in this breastfeeding journey. And also makes him feel like part of the team together. Because I feel like sometimes dads do feel like they want to be part of this like feeding journey and they just aren't capable of doing it, but allowing them to help with some of those tasks makes it feel like you guys really are sort of on this family unit together.
Absolutely. That's so well said, because they feel so good when they can feel like they're helping you. They just want to, they see you and they're like, I just want to help you. I just want to be there for you, but I can't like feed the baby.
Yeah.
What can I do? And that goes with food, but it can also go with nighttime diaper changes.
That's right.
While you're laying in bed and resting, like all that combined, letting him help you. Because I think sometimes women can be a little bit like, no, I need to do it. I'm the baby's mom, and so I need to take care of everything, but let your partner, if you have one, help you.
And they want to, you know, for the vast majority, they want to be involved. It's their child too, and they want to feel connected.
Yeah. And if they don't want to, have them listen to this episode.
Have a talk.
Yeah. So how does nutrition play a role in successful breastfeeding?
Like we said, you know, making sure that you're properly nourished is going to make sure that you have enough energy physically and emotionally to carry out the breastfeeding journey. So it's recommended that women don't dip below 1,800 calories per day. But again, if you're doing all the things that we talked about, that won't be happening. If you're focusing on nourishment versus some sort of body goal that you think you're trying to get to. That's the most important thing. Hydration plays a massive role. Obviously, you're producing a lot of liquid. You need to be taking in enough liquid. Breastfeeding moms need about 16 cups of fluid a day, but that doesn't have to just come from water. It can also come from tea. It can come from any other beverage that you're consuming. Even coffee counts towards your total.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. So this is a very common myth, is that coffee and tea and other things with caffeine actually are diuretics, and therefore they take away from the recommended amount of fluid that you're supposed to have per day. And this applies to both women breastfeeding as well as anyone. You know, the 8 cups a day. That liquid actually does count towards these goals, because it's not such a big diuretic that it outweighs the fluid balance of what you're taking in. So you can certainly count your water, your tea, your coffee, whatever you're drinking, your smoothies, all the foods you're consuming that are rich in water. I think you guys have a lot of very water-packed tropical fruits here. So just making sure you're getting enough. I always had my stainless steel water bottle on hand, and I specifically bought one with a handle on it so that I could be carrying the millions of things that a breastfeeding mom is carrying in addition to the baby.
I also like coconut water. Even if you can't get fresh coconut water, even bottled coconut water. It's such a hydrating.
Yes.
Always makes me feel so good postpartum.
Yes. And you're getting a little bit of energy in there too.
Yeah.
So that's definitely
The
going to help.
electrolytes.
Yes.
Yes, totally.
And, you know, the biggest thing, too, I just want to say when it comes to ensuring you have an adequate supply besides adequate calories and hydration is supply and demand. You know, especially those first few days when baby is cluster feeding, feed constantly. That's going to help to, you know, establish your supply, really feeding on demand. If you're having any supply concerns, whether real or, you know, perceived, we would definitely recommend working with a lactation consultant, an IBCLC, as soon as possible. They can help you identify any latch issues, if there's any pain involved, because really the earlier that you seek guidance and that you seek support and help, the likelier that you are going to continue having a healthy breastfeeding relationship.
Yes, that's in we talk a lot about that in my breastfeeding ebook with an IBCLC, Natalie Marcus, and we talk about the importance of hiring a lactation consultant within the first few days after giving birth, especially if it's your first time.
Yeah.
You know, if this is not your first rodeo, you know what I mean? It is totally comes super naturally after the first time, you know, but the first time it is a learned experience.
Yeah.
So to help lower the stress, let someone help you, hire somebody. It is so worth the $150.
Yeah. Which I think I've heard you say before is that we kind of believe that it's supposed to be this innate ability that we just do and it happens perfectly, and that's just not actually the way it is. That's not how it's been through the course of history. So acknowledging that it's going to be challenging and it's something you have to learn.
Yeah, I did kind of naively think, oh, I'll just figure it out. Like,
Same.
I'm supernatural, like, not supernatural. I'm super into natural living, but not supernatural. You get what I'm saying? But after I gave birth, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing. I was calling my midwife in the middle of the night crying because I couldn't figure it out. Like, he's not latching and all. I don't know what I'm doing. And it really just came down to the mechanics, like being taught how to do it. My midwife would say, take a deep breath, calm, drink some water, go wake up the husband, go wake up Andrew, hand the baby to your husband, go to the bathroom,
take a break,
let your partner like help you with the baby so you can have a moment to yourself and then come back at it, you know, and learn the mechanics of it. And having a lactation consultant can help you with that and ease a lot of that stress.
Yeah, it should be mandated for every woman, and unfortunately it's not.
Yeah, it should be like supportive.
Yeah, it should be part of like postpartum care, you know, wherever you are, you should be able to have access to a free IBCLC because we know just societal benefits too of breastfeeding, but that's a whole nother tangent.
Yeah, totally, right? Totally. But there is, you know, something to be said, like you said, about in the past there was always like a well-seasoned mother, someone who knew what they were doing, in the village to like show a woman how to breastfeed. It's not something that just comes natural like you think it would. Yeah. But then once you do figure it out, you're like, oh, this really is like second, like you know it like in the back of your hands now, and it's super easy. So is there anything else in regards to breastfeeding support that can optimize the health of your baby and the health of yourself while you're breastfeeding, nutrition-wise?
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is that the AAP recommends that all exclusively breastfed infants have vitamin D. Breast milk is naturally very low in vitamin D, likely because we probably were exposing our babies to lots of adequate sunshine once upon a time. But considering the way that most of us live, we want to ensure that baby gets vitamin D in the diet, and you can just get a supplement, put it right into baby's mouth, or even put it on your nipple and let them suck it off.
So is that something you recommend for every baby?
Every baby that's exclusively or partially breastfed.
Oh, interesting.
Because like you said, vitamin D is naturally low. There is some research showing that moms supplementing with very high doses, like 6,400 IUs of vitamin D, could then produce enough vitamin D through their breast milk to meet the needs of a child. But it kind of seems silly to us to do that in order to transfer it. Also, it reaches the upper tolerable level for breastfeeding moms. So just simply providing your baby with, it's like one drop of vitamin D.
What about like because my tendency, like I said, is more the natural. Like we do take supplements. We're not like anti-supplements, but we're just very specific about which ones. And I'd rather get my nutrition and the needs met through natural ways when I can. So when it comes to like vitamin D for us, we live in a climate where we can get enough sun. So we have always had the approach of very small amounts of healthy sun exposure for our children. And with babies, it starts at very small amounts. And so it'll be, you know, this is even my midwives would recommend this, like, you know, just go outside for 5 minutes naked with your baby, let your baby be naked in the sun at like healthy times in the sun, and let them get adjusted to little bits of sun. And that will prevent jaundice and be good for their vitamin D levels. And so just increasing that little bit. But do you feel like that's not enough?
Like again, from an evolutionary perspective, that is how babies got their vitamin D. And it could work for someone who definitely has consistent sun exposure at a specific latitude, who's light pigmentation, because all of these things affect our body's ability to synthesize vitamin D in the skin. I think the problem is, and I'm not saying what you did was wrong. No, it obviously worked out. I think you know your kids have adequate vitamin D levels, but there's no guidelines. So we don't have anything to follow to say, well, if you're a white baby and you live at this latitude, you need 5 minutes of sun. And if you are a black baby and you live at this latitude, you're going to need this much. So the safest, most responsible way would just be, and the way that's actually going to work for most people, because there are just so many factors that impair our body's ability to synthesize.
No, it makes perfect sense. It makes sense, like why you guys advocate for what you do, and you're doing the most evidence, the most like easy to understand understand and straightforward for the masses, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to like specific situations, like you said, or someone who lives in the tropics and we're very careful and very aware of healthy sun exposure, to me, that's what makes the most sense for us. And it just depends on the family. Yeah.
Well, and that's what universal recommendations and guidelines are for. It's really to help meet sort of this lowest common denominator in a sense, right?
Yeah.
So it's not saying that this is the only thing that's going to work for every single person. It's saying, okay, when we look at trends, when we look at, current intake levels, when we look at concerns, public health, what's happening, we need to be able to make universal guidelines. And, for the most part too, these are really easy to pass on. Sometimes when the recommendations become too nuanced, then it can lose sort of its effectiveness. Because if it's like, oh, but for this situation, it's this. For this situation, it's this. If someone's not getting regular prenatal care or is not being exposed to some of these, education messages, it can just feel like, I'm really confused. I'm not sure. So if we just sort of say like, okay, this is the recommendation, full stop. There's no harm in supplementing if you get also vitamin D from the sun, because you're not getting anywhere close to that excessive upper limit when it comes to babies, and it's probably going to be protective for most individuals.
Yeah, it's easier for people to understand and know exactly what to do, and there's no question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Makes perfect sense.
And the cost benefit, like we know with inadequate vitamin D, the dangers are so high. The result could be rickets, where they're not properly forming bones and stuff. So
that's not something I worry about for my family. Here in Hawaii.
If I lived in Hawaii, I might not have.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. But no, that's great. That's really important information. I'm glad you brought up the vitamin D factor, because it's all super important. And most people are living inside all day. Even us in the tropics, we're probably not outside as we probably should be. So that just shows about how much people who aren't even in a place with good sun exposure are not getting enough vitamin D.
Well, and time of the year, like I had my baby in March, which is still too cold, in my opinion, in St. Louis. And when I took her outside, we would do a lot of daily walks, but she was bundled. It was 30 degrees, and I was, protecting her beautiful, delicate skin. So even if you are outside, it depends on time of year and also where you're living.
All right, let's talk about starting baby on solid foods. This is something you guys are really passionate about. You share a lot on Plant-Based Juniors. Anybody listening or watching, definitely go follow Plant-Based Juniors on Instagram, because you share so much information and food tips for raising healthy kids and toddlers and babies. So what's your philosophy on starting baby on solid foods?
Yeah, really the big reason that Plant-Based Juniors came to be was because of this topic around starting solids, because we were both so frustrated with what we felt like was common sort of nutrition recommendations, this, hyper focus on beef being a first food.
Is that really a thing?
Especially lately, there's been a big push
in a lot of different
by
spheres, a lot of
what's
different
the group,
spheres.
the Beef Council, in the past few years has put a lot of money behind campaigning different organizations in the U.S. to position beef as the perfect first food.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, I always thought it was like everyone's saying the pureed peas and the carrots, and it's like they're really not talking about beef.
That was probably even older, when purees first came on the market. But I'd say in like the past 5, maybe a little bit longer years.
That's interesting.
The Beef Council, and listen, we can't deny that beef is an excellent source of iron, of certain nutrients that we would want to ensure are given to infancy. But anyways, so we were so frustrated by those messages, and I was like, well, I haven't eaten meat since 2006. I'm definitely not going to start feeding my baby meat. And I felt like the messages that were out there that were counter to that, we both felt like weren't strong enough, or also weren't really being presented by health professionals. So that's really one of the big reasons that we wanted to start Plant-Based Juniors, was to help fellow families who wanted to sort of say, wait a minute, I don't want to feed my child beef or liver or some of these sort of, recommendations that are out there sometimes. What do I do if I want to feed my baby plants?
Yeah, and what are the downsides to, yes, it's excellent sources of certain things like iron, like you said, but what are the downsides to introducing beef as a first food?
Well, there's no literature specifically about like beef consumption in early age, but I think it's the same thing as with a lot of studies that haven't been specifically on kids, but like the long-term implications of these dietary patterns. So, I mean, we know that foods that are high in saturated fat, and we know actually red meat and processed meats themselves are all things that later in life are associated with poor health, more increased risk of chronic diseases. So twofold, it's likely that an excessive consumption during childhood could start to set the stage for some of these conditions later. later. But also we know that this early feeding period is when kids really develop their flavor preferences. They start to establish the foods that they like and that they're going to eat later in life. So whether or not even these foods may cause problems in that time period, if these become preferred foods, then later in life that's going to be their preferred foods. And we definitely know later in life that these foods are associated with poor health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Those first few years are so crucial in setting kids' palates up for success, to love fruits and vegetables and to eat them in abundance.
Yeah.
And there's so many other sources like of the same nutrients that you get in beef, we can get in other plant-based foods that then come packaged with even more beneficial nutrients like fiber and other vitamins and minerals. So.
Right. Wasn't there a study that they did the autopsies on like
the
people
PDA
in a war or something, and they found arteriosclerosis.
There's been studies both on like children who died unexpectedly, whether in car crashes, and then like you said, there was young men
soldiers
coming back from the war. I want to say
Korean War?
Yeah,
okay.
so.
It's the PDA.
And showing that there was already arterial blockages developing, meaning that atherosclerosis does start to develop early in childhood.
Interesting.
And what's linked with atherosclerosis? Increased intake of saturated fat, for one.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get into specifically how to start baby on solid foods. What's the recommendation there?
Yeah, so the type of feeding, there's not really a best feeding approach as far as the literature is concerned. There's really sort of two approaches that are typically presented. One would be like a traditional pureed approach, which is, spoon feeding baby pureed food. And the other is sort of a more, I would say, recent coined approach. And that would be baby-led weaning or self-feeding, which is really allowing baby to self-feed right from the beginning. We definitely need more research on baby-led weaning, but sort of the emerging evidence is that it may help baby self-regulate, which just sort of is a way to say that allowing baby to really understand sort of these innate hunger fullness cues right from the beginning of starting solid foods, which may help when it comes to weight management later in life. And then also, because baby is introduced to such a wide variety of textures right from the beginning, and then also usually a wider variety of flavors that may help with sort of that earlier introduction to reduce picky eating later down.
So what do you think needs more research on? Because to me, the baby-led weaning makes so much more sense than pureed foods for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
Like you said, the pureed foods having the inability to like know when you're done and letting babies pick foods up themselves and stop when they're done helps with all sorts of things like their hand-eye coordination, picking up foods that they want, the autonomy aspect, and stopping when they're done, but also like the chewing factor and how important it is for their jaw development to be chewing foods at a young age as opposed to pureed foods, which just sets them up for not wanting to chew because we can get really used to like having soft foods and not wanting to have to work for chewing, and how important that is. So what kind of research do you need to see to feel confident that maybe baby-led weaning is better than pureed foods?
We definitely are major advocates for baby-led weaning. Alex wanted to do it from the start, did it with both her kids. Was so excited, was preaching to me about it, got me all excited about it. I did it with my kids. I think what she was saying in regards to saying that there are proven benefits, that's what we need the research for. There hasn't been a lot of studies to say like, yes, kids who were baby-led, kids who self-fed as babies do have a better sense of their own hunger and fullness cues. Like we don't have that research. We have all of these theoretical beliefs about the benefits that we think are derived from them. Yeah. That makes sense. And so, hopefully research will eventually prove that out. But like you said, and the whole point of baby-led weaning is kind of like a return to the way children have been fed since the beginning of people. So I think what we try to say is like, when we say one isn't better than the other, I think what we mean more is that there are many different ways to feed a baby, and it doesn't have to be so black and white. I think there's become these like two camps where it's like babies can only self-feed and you can't feed them anything that's even of a pureed texture, and if you even put a spoon near their mouth, you're a horrible parent.
You've ruined them.
Like, so many things happen through the course of history. Pre-mastication was really how babies were originally fed. So they were eating softer foods. They were eating things parents probably chewed up and like spit into their mouth.
Yeah. Actually, Alicia Silverstone.
Baby birded.
Yeah. I remember like long before I had kids hearing about that, and I was like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Okay,
And
and
I'm like,
I heard that,
actually,
and I was
that's real.
like, I can't wait to baby bird.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Did you guys see that? I had her on the podcast.
Yes.
And she's so fun and hilarious, and how she always is all about the natural mama, right? And
But she was right. That's the way people did.
But then the media just like loves, because the media likes clicks and it's easy. And she's like, you know, just always, just the way that she talks is amazing. And she's just being super honest and loving. And I just love her. So just made me think of that.
Beautiful energy.
She's actually I think she was the first like cool vegan book. Like one of the first.
Oh, I loved
books.
her book.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yes. I tell her all the time. I'm like, I love her recipes.
We love you, Alicia.
Yes. Solely feeding baby purees, again, we don't have the research to say all of those negative things potentially could happen, but it makes sense that especially if purees are carried on too long and solid and more of the handheld and the different textures aren't introduced early enough, that is when you might start to see some problems with oral motor skills. So we kind of advocate
it makes sense. You're just like trying not to be black and white, and you're just giving what the evidence says, which is what you're doing in your job.
Well, and just sort of two additional things to consider is that really by 8-9 months, babies should be self-feeding some or all of the meals anyways. So we're really talking about a difference of about 2 to 3 months, depending if you're doing a traditional spoon-fed approach versus baby-led weaning sort of right from the start. And then the last thing I'll say is, you know, even if you do decide, you know what, spoon feeding really works for my family, I feel like I enjoy it more than I do baby-led weaning, that doesn't mean that you can't listen to babies' cues and really be attuned to them. We would really recommend responsive feeding techniques right from the start. You know, there are lots of ways babies communicate to us, even from, you know, the first moments that they're born, that they're hungry. You know, they can root, they can turn towards the spoon or towards the boob when they unlatch, or sort of turn away or look away. They're probably done. And all of this can be done when we're talking about spoon feeding too. The issue with spoon feeding where it can become problematic is when we're trying to just, okay, come on, take one more bite. Let's finish this jar. You want this? You want this? Come on. You ate more yesterday. I need you to eat more today. Those is sort of where we get away from this idea of baby being able to really regulate appetite.
Mm-hmm. So whatever way you're feeding, to focus on responsive feeding.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know.
So what kind of foods do you recommend then for the first foods to start your baby on?
Well, this is where I will give it to the messaging from the beef people. Protein and iron. The beef people. Protein and really iron, because you are already getting a lot. You're still, when you start solids, going to be getting the vast majority of your calories from breast milk or formula. And that's very rich in protein and lots of other nutrients. The one thing that you aren't getting a lot of is iron. So you really want to focus on iron-rich first foods. And for a plant-based diet, that means things like soy foods, beans, and nuts and seeds in appropriate forms, meaning not in choking hazards, not whole nuts.
Yeah, we did a lot of homemade chickpea flatbreads that I could cut into strips and have baby eat, like asaka. A lot of our like red lentil meatballs, chickpea sort of like balls, you know, really making beans sort of an accessible way, because unfortunately I can't just give my baby a quarter cup of chickpeas and tell them to have at it. Yeah. I had to make it in baby appropriate ways. And that was really one of the things that we found in the beginning, sort of this like we wanted to continue to promote was there are so many fun ways to make plant foods, baby-led weaning accessible. Yeah. And, you know,
yeah, for those who aren't familiar, perhaps, with the different stages, from about 6 to 8 months, baby only has what's called a palmar grasp. So all of the food that they pick up, it has to be able to fit in their palm, and they can only eat the top of the food coming out. So for baby-led weaning, you want everything to be kind of in a stick form. You want it about the size of an adult pinky, and that way baby can grab it and eat just the top.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I think one of the concerns people have, in a strip, that's helpful, because I think a lot of concern people have, they want to go to the puree because they're a little nervous about a baby choking. So the puree is just safer, is how they feel. And it's just one of those things that's really helpful information.
Yeah, well, and to prevent the choking, another major rule is that whatever you're giving baby should be able to be smashed between your fingers. So kind of like you could take a bean and just mash it between your fingers. That means it's soft enough for them to mash with their gums. Right. And then the pincher grasp, which is where they can actually like pick up little pieces of things, that develops somewhere between 8 and 10 months. So that's why Alex is talking about kind of getting creative with all these bean things. We're making patties. We're making strips.
Yeah.
My favorite food to start baby-led weaning with is tofu, like a firm to an extra firm, just because you actually don't have to do anything. You just take it out of the package, you chop it into a strip, and you can literally give it. And my kids loved it with like no seasoning, no flavoring. Yeah. We have lots of recipes where we get a lot more creative and make it fun, especially if you're going to serve a dinner to the whole family.
But you really want to keep it simple at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. You want to keep it simple, and that's a great way to get the nutrition in without feeling like, oh, I have to prepare this whole special meal.
Well, and, especially as you tend to have more and more children, the beauty of baby-led weaning is that you can really look at, okay, what am I making already for the family, and how can I adapt a portion for baby? And I think that's why baby-led weaning does resonate with so many people. I mean, can you imagine like baby number 5, you're having to spoon feed at dinner? It just wouldn't happen. Like there is a benefit.
Or making a whole separate thing for them.
Yes, and then steaming it and pureeing it. And listen, I know that works for some people. We hear all the time from clients who will say things like, I'm so terrified of choking. I just feel safer doing purees. And, that's okay. I mean, there definitely are frameworks to show that. There's a study called the Bliss Study, which really sort of goes into very specific things about what you can do to reduce choking risk. And when followed correctly, like Whitney said, preparing foods in a strip, soft enough to gum, sitting up on their own, upright, not like in your lap or in a car seat, we don't see any greater risk of choking with the baby-led weaning approach.
Yeah, and something I think a lot of people don't really talk about is how good the gag reflex is for a baby. A lot of people forget that, because if a baby's like gagging, and then a lot of times, natural concern is to freak out, but they're pretty good at
let them get it up themselves for a second. Well, that's one thing we always tell parents. When you're going to start solids, watch some videos and learn the difference between choking and gagging.
Good, that's
because
good advice.
A lot of parents see a little gag and you think the baby's choking, but this is a normal part of kind of learning how to consume foods. When they're choking, you'll know it. There's no sound coming out. They may even be changing color.
And if they're gagging and you go and pick them up or hit them on the back, you could actually cause choking.
And lodge it to be worse as opposed to their natural gag reflex.
And that's why babies, they naturally sort of put things in their mouth. They're all trying to sort of learn that gag reflex, and we really want to encourage that.
Yeah, totally. My daughter the other day, she's 6 months old now, and so she's picking things up and putting it in her mouth she had like a stick and like a twig from a leaf or something that she put in her mouth, and then gagged up her milk because that gag reflex from putting the leaf in her mouth gagged it all out. Anyways, that was unpleasant, probably TMI. But the foods that I start all of my kids on is normally avocado. I love the healthy fats, and it's like soft and easy, like long strips, like you said, so they could pick it up. And also sweet potatoes and soft fruits, like fruit from our garden, and bananas and papaya. Papaya is a little bit harder because it's more like mushy and you kind of have to help them with it. But things like sliced bananas and stuff like that. Do you guys do much fruit to start?
Oh, those are all great foods.
Yeah.
I think iron is the thing you need most nutritionally, but really because this window of opportunity for flavor acceptance, we want you doing everything. We want you trying a new food every day. Yeah. The old advice that you had to do one food every 3 to 5 days. Yeah. It actually just doesn't really make sense. It's not necessary, and it could also inhibit this ability to have exposure to a wide variety of foods pretty quickly. So fruits, vegetables, all of the foods your family eats, if you can find a way to prepare them in a baby safe form.
Steamed
broccoli.
Going.
Yeah. Steamed broccoli. Yes. In our book, The Plant-Based Baby and Toddler, we have a whole 2 pages showing you all the different ways you can cut and prprepare different foods to serve to baby for that Palmer grasp. And it's all the fruits and vegetables and tofu and bean patties.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that there are really 2 purposes of solid introduction before age 1 is to really ensure adequate iron intake, and then also promote adventurous eating. Yeah. This is, as most parents know, especially if you have already entered into the toddler, preschool, and beyond years, your baby loves food. It's sort of that honeymoon period. When you first start solids, they start to, usually accept a lot of different flavors. And we really want to sort of capture that. And so the more variety, the more, don't be afraid of spice. We don't want to obviously put like cayenne pepper on our baby's food. But get crazy. Add ginger. I did a ton of like curry stuff, really just to expose them to flavor early on. It doesn't only have to be sort of like single note foods. You know, if I was making like a curry sauce, I would, you know, steam some tempeh and dip it in there for my kids to try that flavor.
Yeah, that there's two things to that, because for one, yes, you want your kids to love the foods that you're eating. You don't want to have to. So many families get in this place where they're making a separate meal for their kids because their kids won't want to eat what you and your husband or your partner want to eat because you're having curry for dinner and the kids don't like curry. Start them young to love all the full flavors of the healthy whole plant foods and fresh, delicious spices that you can add to your meals. If you don't do that, then they're going to just only want the bland crackers and the bland this that you're used to feeding them. Then there's the other factor where I feel like it's really good to show them the simple flavors of something without spices added to it or flavors added to it, like some plain bell pepper or plain steamed broccoli, because then they love the flavor of just plain fruits and vegetables. If we're always having to add, you got to add this to it and this and this to make them like it, then that kind of affects their palate too. So it's interesing.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that they the recommendation is to avoid sugar and salt before the age of 1. Is because for one of the reasons is because of building these flavor profiles. We don't want them to preferentially prefer foods with these things.
Totally. I want to go back to breastfeeding just a little bit because I know we got ahead of ourselves. What about those who are in a situation where they aren't able to breastfeed? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so if you're unable to breastfeed or if you choose not to breastfeed, we would recommend considering donor milk or formula. Those are really the only 2 appropriate options as a substitute for breastfeeding yourself. Any claims that a homemade formula is safe is untrue. We would also really want to stay away from any type of milk alternative, so like an almond milk or coconut milk, even like a soy milk or a plain cow's milk. None of those are appropriate or safe under 1.
Perfect. So can you explain a little bit further why a homemade formula would not be okay? Because sometimes that can, go around the internet that, just make your own formula, but that can lead to like really dangerous outcomes.
Yes. When we hear these headlines about malnourished kids, we often hear that they're being fed these homemade formulas. And the problem is, you think you can look at the profile of a formula and try to replicate it yourself, but what really happens is there's often excesses in certain micronutrients, or there's not enough of certain micronutrients. The base that people use for these formulas is not appropriate for babies a lot of the time. I saw one online the other day that the base was raw cow's milk, and the issue with cow's milk is that before the age of 1, it can actually cause intestinal blood loss, and kids that are fed cow's milk before the age of 1 have a higher risk of type 1 diabetes. They have a higher risk of iron deficiency anemia because they're losing blood through their intestinal tract because of the proteins in cow's milk. It's just not safe. It's very dangerous, and it's not recommended.
Yeah. If you are unable to breastfeed or choose not to, formula is not poison. I think sometimes there is such this like shame sometimes it happens, and the reality is I think it's 70% of all infants at some point are fed formula in the first year of life. So I think we need to obviously encourage breastfeeding and really help to support mom and make sure that she's able to breastfeed, but then also if she cannot or even chooses not to make her feel like it is this giant lesser thing or that she's harming her baby, because those are the messages that really attract women to want to make a homemade formula. And like Whitney said, it is not only safe, it is likely very, very harmful.
Yeah.
It's very predatory, I think, the people that are putting these out there. They're preying on women when you're in a very vulnerable state. You want to do the best thing for your baby, and you feel so this messaging makes you feel so shameful that you might have to go this other route. And so
especially if you're grieving the loss of perhaps not being able to breastfeed and you wanted to, and then you're being preyed upon this vulnerable time, and it just is. Yeah, we definitely don't encourage any of those messages, and we also think that they're really harmful and shameful.
Yeah, the supportive community is like the number one most important part. Like there's no shame or blame. Everyone's doing their best.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, we can also learn from this and be like, how can we support mothers better?
Yes.
And that's actually one of the reasons why I worked with a lactation consultant to create the Tips for Successful Breastfeeding ebook that I made. And in that book, and I share a lot on my platforms, anybody who knows me for any amount of time probably knows how much I love donor milk, and I'm always advocating for it. I'm like even showing myself pumping in the mornings in my videos.
Yeah, I think I heard you say you gave a ton of breast milk away.
Yeah,
that's
actually
awesome.
after each kid, not my first, but second, third, fourth, and now fifth, I just get into this pumping habit around 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the baby. I start to pump every morning, and you just build up a natural supply to have an extra 5 to 7 ounces every morning. And there's a lot of tips for that, and that's in my ebook as well. It's really affordable. And for those of you who are listening who can't afford it, just email me through my website and we'll give it to you, because I'm just so passionate about helping other women be able to give their baby breast milk, and if they are in a situation where they can't breastfeed, to be able to get that from a community, like a supportive community. We just need more of that. There is some of it, but we need more of it. And being able to donate to, you know, another family who needs it for their baby has been just so like rewarding, even for myself. It's just fulfilling to be able to help someone else, because I would love if somebody could help me in that way. And I've been able to donate thousands of ounces of breast milk.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
It really comes down to like different simple tips, like the things you were talking about in the beginning of eating enough calories, right? Staying lower stress about it, which we talked a little bit about, just like lowering the stress in your life, accepting help, being willing to ask for help, and eating enough calories, and hydration, that too. Yep. And then there's the practical tips on like how to be able to maximize your pumping sessions.
Yeah, power pumping.
Yeah, because pumping is not as effective as actual nursing. Like the baby sucking is more effective at drawing out milk than the pump. So you have to like navigate certain tips, and that goes to pumping first thing in the morning. And actually that sometimes sorry, I'm going on a little rant.
This is great.
Going on a rant here.
This is helpful stuff here.
Because the pumping stuff is a passion of mine. Because sometimes I'll get a mother who comes and says, oh yeah, I could use some donor breast milk, but I really get her story first, because I'm like, well, it's not that I don't want to give it to you, but
what's going on?
Yeah, what's going on? Because if I give it to you now, that actually might lower your breast milk supply, because once you start supplementing with something else, that is actually what lowers your supply, because then your baby, it's a supply and demand relationship. So when your baby is suckling on you, that signals to your body to produce more milk, and so when you start supplementing, it's just a very delicate thing. So you want to make sure you're in the exact situation, and some of it might just be someone says, well, I'm getting no milk out when I pump, and so I feel like I need it. But then we just need some tips to help you maximize your pumping session. Are you eating enough? Are you doing that like the certain time of day that helps you get the most? So a lot of people or women, they wake up and they're like, oh, I got to feed my baby first before I pump, because I don't want the baby to not get the milk. But really, you should pump before you feed your baby, because it's not as effective, again, as the baby. The baby will get the rest out. And there's milk in there, like mass majority of the time. Like, there is milk if you're doing these things, right? And you're like educated and understanding like what you need to do to have the proper amount of breast milk, because contrary to popular belief, like the mass majority of women should be able to breastfeed if given the right education and support.
Well, and support. I mean, we really don't support women. They have to be, most of the time, you're going back to work at 6 weeks postpartum, which, I feel like is really the time when you're even starting to get your groove, especially if you're a new mama, on feeding and sleeping, and then all of a sudden have to go back to, a demanding job and figuring out, pumping. I mean, especially for occupations where it's really hard to take scheduled breaks. If you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, if you're, working sort of on behalf of someone else, to say, oh, I have to go take a 15-minute pump break. There's a lot of considerations, and I think that unfortunately we don't prioritize how important breastfeeding is sort of as a society.
Absolutely. I mean, I could definitely attest to that. I was working at a restaurant as a waiter after my first 3 months after I gave birth, and California, at the time I was in California, and the law is technically they're supposed to have a breastfeeding room, for every workplace. But that did not happen at the restaurant I was at. I was, just a standard. I was working at P.F. Chang's. You guys know that restaurant? So I needed to pump. And you also don't get breaks as a waitress, right? Unless it's over 6 hours. And so I had to, speak with my male manager and be like, look, I really need to pump my breast milk. So he said I could pump in his office, and he would have to go and get all the keys from, the top chef, the head chef.
Oh, my goodness.
And the
head, so the whole restaurant has to know about what's going on.
Basically had to know that Ellen Fisher was about to pump. And so he had to get all that. And then on top of it, there was a camera in the office. And so I had to turn it the other way. I mean, the camera thing, they had to have it because that's where the money is and stuff. I don't think it was purposeful.
Sure, yeah. They're not
But
peeping.
They were just doing what they had to do. do, but I'm like trying to turn in a corner. It definitely was not ideal.
It was too hard. Yeah.
And if I wasn't super committed, I could have easily been scared away to pumping.
The amount
at
of
work.
times I've had to pump in a restroom stall is like incredible.
Yeah. Or hand expressing. I definitely had moments like
in my hand expressing like just milk into the toilet because I had nowhere to put it and I was on the go and I'm completely encouraged.
And like you said, like the support, we really need more support in the community. And that's part of the reason why I'm passionate about encouraging other women. If they're in a place to do so, they feel secure in their life, they feel inspired by this topic, like to consider pumping extra milk to donate, because that's another way we can help support women who are in a
different world if everyone who could produce milk was doing that.
Yeah, and not only that, but also encouraging women to be able to make more breast milk or to be able to feel comfortable.
Well, that's where, again, the education and then the proper diagnosis. If you are having problems, not immediately jumping on either assuming that you can't produce or jumping on non-evidence-based options, just like taking a bunch of galactagogues and not worrying about like maybe there's a mechanical issue. So
totally. Like one of the women who had come to me and I explained her the tips. Okay, this is how you get maximum pumping out. And then like 2 weeks later she comes back. She's like, "You're right. I didn't need any of your milk. I just learned how to pump more. And now I got enough pumping milk and now I'm fine," because she had to go to a job and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, that could be an entire episode.
I know. I'm like, have you done an episode on this? You should.
No, I haven't, but I'm like,
that's like you have a ton of information.
No, but it's so important.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to baby.
Okay.
Toddler, solid foods. I think we covered the breastfeeding one pretty well. What is flavor training? What are your thoughts on keeping kids' food separate to what the parents are eating? We talked a little bit about that, but what does flavor training mean?
Okay, so flavor training is kind of this new idea. It refers to, we've talked about the window of opportunity for flavor acceptance, and really there's some research showing that there is a window of opportunity from 4 to 6 months, which is before the age that most health organizations actually recommend starting solids. Both the WHO and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend starting solids closer to 6 months. They have kind of a range, but definitely closer to 6 months. However, we know that this window of opportunity for flavor acceptance begins around 4 months. So this idea of flavor training is that if you could give baby little tastes of different flavors prior to actually starting food consumption, you might be able to start programming their palate to prefer specific flavors. And this is specifically about bitter flavors, those found in vegetables.
That's interesting. So even like before you're starting solid food, just little tastes, like on the
top
top
for
of their
nourishment.
tongue.
Yeah, you may not have been asking it in that regard, but this phrase flavor training is starting to come out as this new thing that parents should be doing.
Yeah.
Babies innately have a preference for sweetness and innately dislike bitter flavors. And this is an evolutionary protective mechanism because back in the day, babies are going around on the floor picking up plants that could potentially be poisonous.
Yeah.
And those were often the ones that were more bitter. So we wanted baby to kind of dislike bitter.
Right.
Evolution wanted baby to dislike bitter flavors for safety. And so it requires repeated exposure. It's a learned thing to learn to like these bitter flavors in vegetables. So flavor training is this idea that if we can expose them early, but we can't give them solid foods because we don't really want them eating solid foods till 6 months. The whole problem is there's not really an easy way to do that. So you could give baby a lick of different, like some pureed carrots or some pureed broccoli, but if you're advocating the way we are for eating family foods or baby-led weaning, you don't just have these non-salted
purees,
soft purees to literally just give baby a lick of to kind of train their palate. So it's kind of this interesting idea, but I don't really know about the practicality of it. Not specifically this type of flavor training, but if we're talking about just learning to like these foods going forwards, once you do start eating solid foods at 6 months, there's plenty of ways to start training a baby's palate. And that's really just providing this wide variety of flavors early and often. Some of the literature shows that it could take anywhere from about 8 to 15 times before a baby will even try a new food that they see or put it in their mouth, let alone actually like it and start eating it on a regular basis. So something we like to remind parents is just because your baby rejects a certain food, don't give up. I mean,
Totally.
That's how you immediately end any opportunity of them ever learning to like it.
Yeah, you just keep offering it. Yes.
Over and over again. And even foods that they might have liked. Maybe your baby was eating broccoli and carrots, and then around 1 or 2, which is the age when picky eating typically sets in and can also last till about age 6. That's the average window. If they start to reject these foods and dislike things that they used to like, still keep offering them. It can take years before they'll come around again. But if you never give them that opportunity to come around again because you just never put it on their plate, it's never going to happen.
I can definitely attest to that. My mom growing up, like even though we had a lot of, lots of types of foods that we were eating, both healthy and not as healthy foods, we always had vegetables all the time. It was just always on the plates. And we'd be like, oh, we don't like cilantro. We don't like it. We don't like cilantro. But she kept adding into certain things. And here it is if you want it. Da, da, da. And then eventually we're like, oh, we do like cilantro.
Yeah, that's great.
Just that kind of thing that you experience that you growing up.
And I also feel like it's so easy as a parent to be like, well, yeah, why am I going to make food that I know my kid might not like? And I think that tends to be such a sort of common barrier. But the reality is that kids are picky. There is, food neophobia where they might not wanting to try new food. And so if we sort of stop it and don't give it, then we're really not giving our kids the opportunity to be adventurous eaters.
Yeah. And I just play pickup mom. Like, all right, whatever you don't eat, I'm just
same.
We're
not saying you serve foods that you don't even eat and just keep exposing your child. We're talking about foods that are common for the family should be things that you continue to provide them. Yeah. And Alex and I have seen the benefits of this in our own house. My son was... who's the older one, he's almost 5 now. He was kind of picky from the start. There was no window of magical eating where he would try a lot of foods from 6 to 12 months.
Every kid is different.
And I did all the things. But he was a little bit less picky as a baby. But then he pretty much would never really eat vegetables. And I just kept putting, this is a recent success. So I think every day for school for the past 2 years, I put carrot sticks in his lunchbox. And just about a month ago, and I put it on his plate at dinner when it makes sense. And I look over and he's eating a carrot stick.
Yeah, you're like,
instead of a burrito, his absolute favorite food. I was like, not only are you actually eating this thing that you haven't ate for 4 years, but you're eating it instead of this other thing on your plate that you love. It's like, success.
Yes, totally.
It works.
That's a really good encouragement for mothers, I think. And some kids are going to love vegetables just from the get-go.
Yeah, my daughter's the opposite.
Yeah.
Chomping on asparagus over at dinner. And I'm like, even adults don't like asparagus a lot.
My son Kofax went through this phase where he just only wanted broccoli. That's it. Steamed broccoli, that's it. Nothing else. We're like, you don't want the sweet potato, you don't want the avocado. Nope, just the broccoli. Wow. That's all he wanted was steamed broccoli. We're like, okay, well, you've got to eat something else. You can't just eat broccoli. But it does remind me back to what you're saying about babies, at what age they're eating more solid foods. And it's interesting. I feel like this guideline or this timeline that's like, oh, babies should be eating this much solid food by this date. Actually, none of my kids have eaten very much solid foods till they were 12 to 14 months. And it was pretty much all breast milk and everything else was just play. Between the 6, 7, or 8 month mark when they start foods, and then to a year to 12 to 14 months, they're picking it up and barely playing with it and barely touching, barely getting much in their mouth, but it's just playing. And then once they hit that 12, 14 months, that's when they're all of a sudden they're eating good amounts of it to where it's replacing breastfeeding sessions. Yeah. But it sounds like a lot of people can be different where they're eating a lot more, a lot younger.
And I think it's important to remind people that what we think they're eating or what they're supposed to eat is a lot different from what they actually are eating. You know? Especially when you're doing baby-led weaning, you're like, oh my God, they didn't eat anything.
Yeah.
But they actually might be getting more in than you think they are.
True.
I mean, I joke all the time. My kids loved eating from the very beginning and had, ravenous appetites. And then, things change. I think also to point out too that a lot of parents will talk about is after they turn 1, sort of the opposite sometimes happens where suddenly appetite decreases because growth slows down and parents feel like, oh, I now have to force my kid to eat more. And it's kids are really good about understanding how much food they need. And there are times of growth and of where they're going to eat more food. And there are times of less growth where they're not going to be as hungry.
You definitely don't want to shame or push and make it this like you gotta eat type thing. Like just trust in your child's intuition and their body the way that you do for your body, that you're not going to force yourself to eat when you don't want to eat.
Yeah. And that's something we're really big on when it comes to feeding kids, is sort of this trusting relationship. I think sometimes there can be such a I'm the parent, I know I'm going to do this. And I think really to have a successful, maybe optimal feeding relationship, it's also about trusting your kids and really trusting them to know how much, food they need, when they're hungry, when they're full, what kind of foods they like, and letting them sort of have that autonomy when it comes to food choice.
Great. Okay, so I have kind of one more roundabout type question, but might take a little bit time to get into. What does the science say about the health of feeding kids predominantly plant-based?
So there's not a ton of literature on the long-term outcomes of plant-based diets for kids. But what we do have is very positive. And it shows that plant-based dietary patterns, when appropriately planned, as all dietary patterns should be, are not only safe but likely beneficial, specifically for reducing potential chronic diseases later in life. And that is a position that's supported by the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, the Canada Health, and many other health associations globally.
Yeah, one thing we do see too is that plant-based kids tend to have higher intakes of fruits, they tend to have higher intakes of vegetables, higher intakes of whole grains, and they tend to have lower intakes of things like candy and cake and the other one, sugar sweetened beverages.
Fast food.
Yeah. So overall, they just tend to have healthier dietary patterns. And, as Whitney said too, we don't necessarily, we do have some data. So we have the more recent Vici studies that show that plant-based kids tend to have higher intakes of many nutrients. There are some things that we want to ensure are really well planned in the diet, especially things like calcium for adequate growth. Most of the kids in the Vici study were supplemented with vitamin D and B12, so those levels were optimal. But I think that one of the biggest benefits in starting your kids eating this way is they're just setting them up for life. And we're really sort of from a very, very beginning stage setting the course, or setting the table, if you will, for what is sort of the optimal food culture, and really introducing them to these foods that we know are really optimal when it comes to reducing chronic disease risk. And I think that is one of the biggest gifts and the biggest benefits in choosing a plant predominant or even a plant exclusive diet.
Yeah, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about beef. We're like, we don't have any studies showing that beef in babies is bad, but we do know that consuming a lot of beef later in life is associated with poor outcomes. Therefore, we can assume that if you're programming your child at this early age to prefer these foods and they continue to eat those foods later in life, then we're going to see the same health outcomes that we see for adults who eat these foods. So the same thing can be said for a plant-based diet. We are setting our kids up to enjoy foods that are rich in fiber, vitamin C, vitamin A, all of these things that are associated with good health, and likely the same benefits that plant-based dieters in adulthood that we see in studies of plant-based adults will hopefully be the same for children too as they age and continue to eat these foods.
And the studies
talk about this. There's a lot more literature on adults and the benefits of plant-based diets. I'm sure you've covered them in other episodes, but
the studies we do have too, when it comes to some of these cardiometabolic risk factors in kids, we do see that plant-based kids have lower levels of cholesterol. They do have lower blood pressure. So we do know that even at an early age, it is sort of this optimal dietary pattern.
And lower rates of obesity.
That's right. We don't talk too much about sort of the weight in childhood, just because there's so many factors that play into it, but that definitely is an additional benefit to consider. Plant-based kids on average tend to have lower BMIs.
And optimal BMIs, not like too low.
Yes, excuse me. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and again, the Vici studies showed that they had vegans and vegetarians had similar growth to omnivores, which is a common concern, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, we hear a lot of questions about height and stunted growth, and that's just not what the research shows. Especially the Vici studies, they had normal height with normal BMI.
That definitely hasn't been my experience either. All of my kids are above average height.
I was going to say, if we need another another anecdote. I just saw your kids at lunch, and they're all giants.
They're all giants. I know, basically. They're all super tall.
Yeah.
Well, that's also because my husband is very tall. He's 6'3". Okay, I think we're gonna end it here. We have been talking a lot.
I know. I love it. You're so natural, Ellen. This is so fun. It's
so
like a
fun.
conversation. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. This was so great.
Thank you
and
for having
thank
us.
you everyone for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.